It's exactly 42 minutes after 7. You're welcome to our conversation. Our time with the National Democratic Congress is 1 hour. We're live on the Super Morning Show on Joy FM, also on the AM show on Joy News. And Madam Mona Korte, who's the Deputy Finance Minister, is joining in Shirado and myself, Mama V. Swabwaje, today. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Mama V, and good morning, Sure.
Good morning.
Thank you for making it.
It's my pleasure.
Well, always good to have you around.
Thank you. I also love coming to Joy FM.
That's awesome, awesome.
Telling the story.
So this is day 3 of, an interaction with the National Democratic Congress. And today we will be looking pretty much about the economy, how far you've come and where you intend to take us. But I'm keen, and as are many other people, to know how the government is managing with the current freeze on the consolidated account and the Treasury single account.
Well, very simply, we are doing well. We actually have not felt any impact of any freeze. I think that is a situation that is being handled by Attorney General's department. But in terms of the accounts that we are using, our operational accounts, we don't have any that are frozen. So government business is as usual. There may be some accounts that have been garnished, or but the operational accounts between the Ministry of Finance, Controller, Accountant General's department are operational.
So does that mean that those specific accounts aren't frozen?
We are not actually even sure exactly which accounts are supposed to be frozen, in quotes, but we know that there is a case that the Attorney General is working on with a complainant, and the complainant wants to freeze accounts. In fact, there's been a judgment, but no accounts have actually been frozen that affect our business, government business. We are still able to operate as of now. Basically, I'm saying that's not an issue.
So that's not an issue, but then there is, that the consolidated account and then the Treasury account has been frozen. These are two key.
Not to the best of our knowledge.
Not to the best of your knowledge.
We're working within them. So
I want to find out what the state of the economy is really, because we've heard opposition say, for instance, that there's no money in the system. There's no money, there's no money, there's no money. So is there money? How much is there?
Thank you, Mama V. Well, globally, there's no money in the system. One can put it that way. And when people say there's no money in the system, perhaps they are talking about that surplus that can be used for the extra things. Globally, there isn't that money in the system. In Ghana, though, we do have enough to run government business, but we've always, since 2010, we've had a fiscal deficit that we've had to manage. And therefore, starting from 2014, we zoned in on bringing or narrowing that fiscal deficit. What is a fiscal deficit? It's the difference between what you earn and what you spend, so between revenue and expenditure. So we've really concentrated on mobilizing revenue, increasing revenue, and the Ghana Revenue Authority has been very helpful in bringing us tax revenue. We've also tried to improve non-tax revenue with difficulties, because as you know, the companies that pay the largest tax, the large tax companies, they've suffered because they are mainly cocoa producing or gold producing and so forth. So they've suffered in terms of their revenue, and therefore their taxes, corporate taxes, have also come down. But we've been able to generate taxes from other areas. In fact, there was a reduction in importation, so we did see customs duties come down a bit, but those have even improved over time with compliance measures. What has happened is that, as with every system, you do have some leakages. And so starting in 2014, we really zoomed into compliance measures and ensuring that we closed those leakages, and that has resulted in some success. The end of last year, the Ghana Revenue Authority overshot its target, which was great. This year, of course, they seem to be struggling, but that is because of the seasonal nature of the tax revenue. You find that most of the tax revenue is paid in around the end of the year. So starting from now into the end of December, we will see an uplift in the tax revenue that comes in. And then in terms of other revenue to government, sales of oil, gold, and so forth, we all know what happened to oil prices that affected us. We had to revise our budget. Even the price of oil per barrel that we were using when looking at $53 per barrel, we had to revise that to $45, which means that there was a reduction in revenue. But the good thing in Shrai Mamavi is that Ghana is not a major oil exporter and a producer as well. We are not a major one, and therefore we've been very careful to always monitor our economy without oil revenues and our economy with oil revenues. And without oil revenues, the growth is great. We are working quite well. We don't want to get into this Dutch disease syndrome where we become over-reliant on the oil revenues. It's cream on the cake, and we'll use it for other things, other priority projects, capital expenditure, that sort of thing. And also, we put some of that in the Ghana Investment Infrastructure Fund, which is one of the funds that supports us to build infrastructure, not for infrastructure's sake, but for delivery of service so that we can grow the economy. So up until now, we've done all the work to stabilize the economy. And whilst you're stabilizing the economy, surely you're not going to grow. And that's why perhaps you hear people saying there's no money, there's no money. They're talking about excess money for consumption. But we've done a lot of savings as a government. We have the sinking fund and we have other buffer funds. And those are the kind of things that we use to reassure investors that we will be able to repay on loans, we will be able to return on equity, and that we have the buffers to do so. So those are reserve accounts that we have built up. No government has done that as well as we have done that.
Well, of course, you would say that you've done well. I wouldn't expect you to say anything else.
Within the circumstances.
Absolutely. Yes. But there are still concerns, about our external debt, for example. At the moment, repayments are close to 10 billion cedis. I was talking to some, consultants who were looking at our numbers, and they are quite concerned that we probably are teetering towards a default. What do you say to the debt exposure of the nation?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you did qualify that you spoke to some consultants, so they are outside the system. In debt management, and whether on the corporate side, private side, or public side, what is most important is default risk. The good news about what we are doing in terms of our debt management is that we don't have that risk at all. It is a risk that exists for any and everyone, as we saw in the case of Greece in Europe. But for Ghana, we've lowered that default risk. We've mitigated it. How have we done this? We've done this by having debt service reserve accounts so that we always have enough to pay or to service our debts. We make sure that we have enough for interest, we have enough for principal. The important thing recently is that to make those payments on time, because if you don't make payments on time, it's a default event. So what we've done is we've created our electronic platform. We have the Commonwealth Secretariat who's helping us to set up our debt management system. Within the Public Financial Management Law that just came out, we talk about a debt management office, a standalone, so that we can really target and focus on debt management. And so we're going to have all the software, the electronic platform that will help us to be able to make those payments, interest payments, principal payments, on time, in fact, even ahead of time. So the default risk is reduced there. The risk that Ghana faced recently was rollover risk, because we had a debt profile which was skewed to the short term. We were borrowing more short term to finance capital expenditure, which is needs long-term funds. In fact, it doesn't only need long-term funds, but it needs patient capital that can wait, because it's for things like schools and hospitals and roads, which don't pay back immediately. They have a longer repayment period. So the debt profile was skewed to the front, and because it was skewed to the short term, the interest rates in the short term were high, and there was a lot of complaint about government being in the front end and crowding out private sector. So one of the strategies that we've really embarked on and has been successful is that we've rearranged that landscape. We've moved most of that short-term debt into longer-term debt. So we issued recently the 10-year US bond, local one. We also did another Euro bond in September. The Euro bonds, of course, give us a longer period. The last one we did was 5 years, but that was strategic because it was mainly to refinance the upcoming 2017 maturity. That was the bond that was issued in 2007, 750. And in fact, whilst we were even streamlining or realigning the payments, we also went ahead and were opportunistic to buy back some of that debt. When that Eurobond was issued, there was no mechanism for how it would be repaid. It was just borrowed, used for capital expenditure and whatever else, but there was no thought into how would it be repaid. And we've been able to set up the sinking fund properly. We've been able to make sure that it's been serviced properly, and we've actually bought back a lot of it. And we are now left with about $200 million or so approximately left to be paid. So we've bought back almost $500 million of that. And you know, that kind of debt management strategy is important. You don't just borrow and forget about it. So you have the people who do the actual implementation, which is the sector ministries, transport, roads, and so forth. And we sit in the back. We are sort of the back office. We make sure that in terms of investors or lenders, we don't default. We don't have a rollover risk, which I just talked about. So you're borrowing short term all the time. It's 90 days, it's 180 days, you're worried because time flies. Within 6 months, it's here. So what we've done is we've moved it to 7 years and we've moved it to 10 years. We've given ourselves longer periods. We've also used our concessional funds very, very well. World Bank, African Development Bank, all the Exim banks. We've made sure that we take them further and further out. 20 years, 25 years. In fact, with Korean Exim Bank, we can go as far as 40 years. So the longer out that government can borrow for some of these infrastructure projects, the better for the government. So, or the better for the nation, which is what is most important.
Because governments could change.
Exactly. So for the nation. So we've streamlined that. We've changed the landscape on that. And that makes debt management much easier and more fun.
But you've missed out on your deficit target for the first 7 months of this year. Is that a case of, you know, poor revenue or...
yes, the revenue has not come in.
Or we're borrowing too much. No. The revenue has not come in as much as we would have loved to see. However, that's why I first spoke about seasonality and timing. What we have seen, the trends, is that most of those revenues come in by the end of the year. However, in terms of non-tax revenue, oil prices seem to be ticking up. Now, gold prices have gone up a little bit, but there'll be a time lag. We will see the effect of that first quarter next year. But I believe that we will meet our revenue targets for this year. And the big question is, why do I believe that? It's because of the compliance measures that we have in place. We are meeting with GRA, customs, every week, sometimes twice a week, going through the revenue numbers, going through the sources of the revenue numbers, what is happening, actually drilling down to details and finding out if there's any lag, if there's any softness anywhere, and making sure that we are tightening all that. So we are confident that by end of year, we should get the revenue we're expecting, and perhaps even achieve it, because we've incentivized the GRA officers to try and beat the target so that they can have a wonderful Christmas as well. So we think that the fiscal deficit will continue to narrow, and we'll meet our target of 5%. Interesting. But there's still the concern that the way, if you look at the numbers as we have come across over the years, we're still going to end up with quite a high deficit, and that's not something that you set out to do. What is high
deficit? If you can,
your target of, I think you wanted to do about 5.
5, yes.
But you're tracking about 8 at the moment.
It's not exactly 8, but like I explained, it's because the revenue has not yet come in. But as soon as that revenue
You're confident in the next 34 days will be...
It's the trend. It's always been the trend that the tax revenue comes in by end of the year, because that's when most of the large taxpayers rush to come and pay before.
So
the year
by
ends.
end of year is exactly when?
it's a period of time. It's from now till the tax office closes at the end of December. So during this period, we are seeing more and more people coming in and settling their tax bills and so forth. So from the corporate side, we are seeing a lot of that happening.
So with the experience over the period, what figure do you think we might end up with?
I think we'll be close to the 5%. I think we'll get close to the 5%. And again, I am confident about the revenue numbers because I know we can do it. It's not a problem. But also expenditure rationalization. I know that a lot of people have complained that we've cut and cut and cut. But, you know, it gets to a time in your life when really you don't need all that excess, you don't need all that abuse of funds and so forth. And you need to really decide that, listen, I'm not going to just throw money away for throwing money's sake, but I'll use it in areas where I will get maximum effect. And therefore, we've been careful to make sure that our budget, which is now program-based rather than activity-based, and also it's a 3-year rolling rather than 1 year, that budget is now a strong one in terms of controlling expenditure and making sure that we reduce overruns, we pay off arrears. But to a large extent, what you're saying, I can understand. You can wish for the best, you can work towards the best, but life happens. So we've seen sometimes where there have been some overruns. Because, for example, when we put the net freeze on employment, we didn't do that for education and health, and for good reason. In all these numbers that we play with and talk about, it's all about the people. So we must work the numbers to suit the people. It's not work the people for the numbers. So in whatever we do, we ensure that there is social protection, that we've reduced poverty and we continue to take it further down. It's an uphill task, but continue to take it down. That we continue to educate. We continue to ensure that people are strong and healthy. So we haven't put a freeze on employment in health and education, and there was an excess there. When teachers come out of training college, or nurses come out of training college, and doctors come out of medical school, it would be unwise to make them redundant. You should utilize them. And therefore, we take them in and we use them and try and settle their salaries. The one thing that this government has been sure of, and in fact most governments, I have to say, is we've never had a situation where people haven't had their salaries for a long time. Except for those who don't have financial clearance, which means that you don't have clearance to even be on the payroll.
But there has been quite a number of agitations of groups that have financial clearance but have not received their pay.
I think a lot of them were looking for allowances rather than their base pay. But in terms of base pay, that has always...
So we're up to date on base pay with everyone?
It's always been paid. Arrears on the single spine salary conversion, a lot of that has also been paid. So we've always been... there's never been a lag on salaries and wages. We've always made sure that it's key, we pay that. The other key thing that we always make sure we pay is debt servicing. And that's why those two things have now become the issue that we have to deal with. Because no government in Ghana, I think since 1992 or so, has ever been late on making, late meaning 2-3 months, on making wages and salaries payments. We've also never defaulted, actually. We've had circumstances that are just bordering, but we've never defaulted on any loan. So those two have been critical, and therefore that's why we had the overshoot on those. And the IMF came in April 2015 and said those are the two areas you need to focus on and bring it in line. So that has been, you know, the effort. Mama, we were worried that those two things shouldn't get compromised. We've made sure they don't, but at the same time, we've made sure that they don't result in a fiscal deficit.
I was just going to go back a little bit because I sense that you're reassuring us that we're not going to overrun our budget because it's an election year. We're commissioning a lot of projects, and is that an assurance that we're not going to overrun our budget? Because we know that we did that in 2012.
Okay. So there's an assurance that we are not going to overrun our budget, and that's why I've talked about expenditure rationalization and what we are doing there. But what is delightful is that we are commissioning projects that we've been working on for years. And it would have been a pity that we wouldn't have been able to commission them, because when you've worked so hard to deliver infrastructure, as this government has done, the Mahama and Mr. Arthur government has done, it's important that you deliver that infrastructure so that it's not delivering infrastructure for itself, but that it delivers the services that it should bring. The schools must educate, the hospitals, we don't have, so that we have a low maternal mortality rate, infant mortality rate goes down, children are better educated, speaking better English, that the roads are there to bring food from the hinterlands, you know. So now we have all these interchanges and all the amazing infrastructure, but it's not about the beauty of the infrastructure. It's about what it delivers and how it improves our economy, how it creates the enabling environment for us to grow. We've stabilized the economy now. It's time to grow. So next year we should start seeing that growth that we are all expecting.
Let's talk a little bit about our local economy, and I'm talking about the average Joe like me feeling money in their pocket. There's always a trickle-down effect when our contractors are paid on time. How are we doing on that?
So that's on the expenditure side. Contractors being paid, at the end of the day, you will pay as the flows come in. A contractor's bill may be due, but if we don't have the flows to pay the contractor at a certain point in time, we can't. So we make arrangements with the contractors. As you know, they are always in our corridors checking to see if their payments are ready. But we have discussions with them. We let them know what is possible, when it's possible, and so forth. So that's an ongoing thing. We will always have arrears on payments to contractors, but we try and clear as much as possible.
On the
so you talk about yourself, the average person, that once a contractor is paid, then he spends, and therefore you are able to also get some of it. Contractors, even if their payments are in arrears, they constantly have a flow coming in. I haven't seen any contractor who stopped working. Even when they come to the end of the contract, even after all the trial and tribulations that they go through, they still come back and say, Madam, can we have some more work to do? They still want to work for government because government is the best employer to work for. Irrespective of when you will get paid, you will get paid. Some of the contractors have difficulty because they borrow too much. And that's one of the things that we need to try and fix. Most of our infrastructure or service providers, local, don't have the capital required to be able to run that business. And they struggle a bit with that. So they borrow short term, come and do a contract. And if we don't pay them on time, then they're about to lose their collateral and all that. We are working on making sure that this tightened credit will open up hopefully next year, and they will be able to borrow. Once government is out of the front end, that front end up to the 3-year period for borrowing is open for them. Interest rates will come down. We've seen inflation come down. The monetary policy rate came off by 5 basis points, which is, small but good enough. So we should see local contractors being able to borrow at a better price locally, and then be able to deliver projects and have that buffer of time to wait for their checks. But invariably, we do pay all the checks at the end of the day.
It's about 5 minutes after 8. You're still here on the AM show on Joy News on television. And we're also live on the Super Morning Show on Joy FM. It's our time with the National Democratic Congress. And today, taking her turn is Madam Mona Korte, who's a Deputy Finance Minister. I want to talk about some of the new projects that you're commissioning. And you've commissioned quite a while, so maybe congratulations will be better.
Thank you so much.
But I wonder if all these had been planned already, because there are new projects that are also being started. Where's the funding coming from?
Well, we did put a ban, sort of, on new projects when we went into the program, the IMF program, in April of last year. So the projects that you're seeing being commissioned are not totally new. The ones that we are cutting short for, but they are now going to start construction or anything, are projects that we had decided on a long time ago. But we were arranging the financing, we were going through the procurement period, and this time we've been so thorough and detailed that these things have taken a little longer. But the good news is that they are now coming on board. So yes, we did the shortcutting for the private public participation in the Tema Port expansion, which was the MPS and Ghana Ports and Harbour coming together to expand the port, which is so important. This port is not only important to Ghana in terms of transporting goods, but it's also important to the landlocked countries. So it's very critical for the region. So this project was just in time and perfect. Of course, the Takoradi port is also going to be expanded. And then SNIT, which is our own trust fund. This year, they celebrated their 50-year anniversary. They delivered some corporate social gifts as well. There was the Bukom Boxing complex that was commissioned 2 weeks ago. That was a fantastic complex that speaks to the health and well-being of the people. This morning...
But that's not government funded, is it?
No, but I'm saying that even on the private side, it takes both public and private to deliver these things. Then this morning, again, another sword cutting for the Lavender Hill Mudo plant. That is one that since I came into office mid-2014 has been on the table, and we've been discussing. And personally, I'm a little finicky about environment. So I've always said, how do we dress up, make up, spray perfume, wear suits, and come to the office when our waste treatment is such a mess at the Lavender Hill, and the Mudo plant was not working, and we were discharging raw sewage into the sea. Today, we are starting the action of making sure that that doesn't happen, but that we process that waste so that we have an affluent or water affluent that is not so polluted and can be used for gardening, so that we have fertilizer, because you can't produce that out of it. But more importantly, that we don't discharge into the sea.
Isn't it a coincidence that we're doing all these beautiful things very close to election day?
We are not doing them, we are delivering them around this time. These are projects that, like I said, have been discussed, worked on all this time. So all the time that you didn't hear us talking about projects, these are the things we were getting ready, and now they are ready for delivery. And the timing is right. It's amazing. It's coming at Christmas time. And so it's...
Is it Christmas or election?
It's Christmas time. It is Christmas time, and President and his vice are delivering these things that we need, these things that are critical, that need to be part of the enabling environment to help us to grow and continue to be the black shining star of Africa.
You mentioned a number of projects, and I'm keen to ask about the Ghana Ports expansion project and the hospital that Legon, the University of Ghana Teaching Hospital. These are initiatives of the, the institutions themselves. How much did government do in that?
The Tema Port expansion is being done as a joint venture between Meridian Port Service, which is private sector, and Ghana Ports Authority. Let's always remember that Ghana Ports Authority is the one who has the mandate, the umbrella mandate to do anything at all. And they can invite anyone to come into it. They invite, there's an equity portion from both sides, and together they go out and borrow. Fortunately, with respect to what you're asking, Ghana Ports and Harbour has the balance sheet, the strong balance sheet, because they've done well as a state-owned enterprise to have a strong balance sheet, and we are proud of them. And they've been able to use that balance sheet together with the private sector's balance sheet to do a further expansion. That is a partner that they are already working with, as you know. They've been working with them for a while. So that's a nice collaboration. Again, we see collaborations with GNPC, Ghana National Petroleum, where they also collaborate to develop oil fields and to deliver oil. So those kind of collaborations do well when the state-owned enterprise has its own strong balance sheet. And as government, what we have done now is that we've insisted that the times of when we would just give sovereign guarantees and where we would just support some of these projects, which in fact are commercial projects, are over. But that now they should be able to do that on their own. And even if we have to borrow for them, then we will set up on-lending accounts and escrow accounts for debt servicing so that they will be conscious. This is part of that fiscal discipline. They'll be conscious of being able to repay. If there is a gap, a viability gap, government will step in and fill that, just to be able to deliver projects. But we are bringing up this discipline of borrowing and repaying yourself at whatever level, right down to the micro level. You borrow, you repay. That is what you should do.
It seems a number of the projects you mentioned are using the public-private partnership model. This, globally a claim that it's a good thing, but it also has inherent problems, especially where user fees are concerned, and the average Ghanaian is not earning a lot of money. You talked about the viability gap. Are we not ending up financing and subsidizing services to the people all over again?
Okay, so PPPs have, public-private partnerships have different models within them, and they come with concession periods. And sometimes PPPs are just simply JVs, joint ventures. So you are right, the rates or the tariff or user fee is critical because that speaks to cost recovery and perhaps even a margin. Even if the public sector is not interested in a margin, the private sector is. They want a return on their investment.
That's right.
So the PPP model is only for projects that lend themselves to being commercial projects, that they can return. There are certain projects that cannot be PPP. Increasingly, we are finding that the railway projects that we want to do cannot be PPP. So recently, I signed a loan agreement between Ghana and the India Exim Bank that was concessional for the Akosombo-Tema railway line. That cannot be a PPP. That is something government has to deliver. And so we get concessional loans to deliver that. In the past, we used a lot of commercial loans, and that was because we became a lower middle income country. We're now big boys and big girls, so we had to borrow more expensive. But we've been able to stabilize that situation. We've spoken to a lot of our lenders and our development partners about the fact that even though we are now a lower middle income country, we still need help. So we must be viewed as a transition economy. They shouldn't take away the grants so quickly. They shouldn't take away the concessional facilities so quickly. They should in fact help, and the World Bank has been very helpful. For the Sankofa Jinyami fields, they gave a partial risk guarantee that helped us to raise the $8 billion at better rates. When we did one of our Eurobonds, they gave us again a partial risk guarantee that helped us to get the Eurobond at a better rate.
Is this the one you got at 19%?
No, Eurobond.
Oh, that's okay. So, but one of your
the 19 was the local.
Was the local.
The local.
Isn't that a little
dollar,
expensive?
Sorry, the local CD bond,
that's
the
right.
10-year bond. 19% as against a base rate at the banks of 25%. That is great.
The base rate
on CD.
This is the government borrow.
Well, monetary policy rate is 25.5%. So if government borrows at 19%, we've borrowed very good. So that has been great.
So this is wise borrowing.
Yes, this is excellent borrowing. And then we also did the dollar bond. That you shouldn't forget. We did the local dollar bond, which also was oversubscribed, did very well. And that was even 6.25%. So that told us that perhaps we should have been looking in-house rather than going external. And we are glad that we've got that indication. But you know, that's one of the things that the Bible always tells us. Always look inside yourself. What can you do yourself? And that is coming out nicely. We've moved from the homegrown policies, which we set up. We've built on that through the fund program. And now we are achieving the success. And it's success for all of Ghana, really. I mean, everybody's going to enjoy the infrastructure that we are delivering.
So this is kind of like a personal question, but since you're the Deputy Finance Minister, I think it's appropriate. I live in Kuntunsi, and when I heard that a loan facility had been passed in Parliament for the Pokwase Road to be done, I was excited.
Yes,
but I had to pause. How long does it take? When you say a facility has been passed in Parliament, what does that really mean, and when would we see the work take place?
Okay, so that's Pokwase Interchange, is the Kasua Pokwase Interchange is the one that, no, actually it's Awoshi. Pokwase Awoshi, is that the one?
Yes,
yes.
Yeah,
that is a facility from African Development Bank. So those are one of our development partners, and they do lend to us at good rates. And Parliament passed that loan, and also all the terms of the loan. So I don't know if you saw the picture of it. That's
I've seen it.
Was just to speak to your mind and let you know
it's
what will be
beautiful.
delivered.
Would we actually have that on the ground?
It will happen because the African Development Bank is conscientious. When they give you money to do something, and that has been the trend that we've seen, they always make sure you deliver. They can't give you monies from other people for you to put it away. So that interchange is going to happen. The Kwame Nkrumah interchange happened. That one is also going to happen. And in fact, preparatory work is ongoing. So It will be
so
delivered.
we're going to see work happen next year?
Yes. Why not? Once we have the money, work will begin. In fact, all the processes are starting, procurement processes, EPC, all that is starting. So yes, we will see that infrastructure delivered. The Fufoso-Solwa Road, that was delivered. The African Development Bank president then came down and cut the opening. So yes, there's always the start and there's always the end, but we do complete, which is important. And it's one of the reasons why we move from activity-based budgeting to program-based budgeting, to ensure that projects have a start and have a finish. And we also made sure that there were no more new projects, but all the old projects that had been discussed and drilled down actually got delivered or got started.
Let's talk a bit about our sovereign guarantee. Does it hold any sway in the market today?
It does. In fact, the last World Bank report and even IMF report indicates that Ghana is now being seen by investors as getting stronger. The economy has stabilized. I don't need to talk about all those things again. You know it, exchange rate, inflation, all the indicators. It is clear that Ghana is the peaceful country, the country that has been respectful of democracy and used it well, except recently when there's been too many insults all over the place. But generally, we've handed over government from one to the other peacefully. So even in the region, this is the preferred destination to invest money. So the world is looking to Ghana, and increasingly, they're not asking for sovereign guarantees anymore because of the debt management strategy that we have in place. They can see clearly how they will get paid, and therefore they are comfortable to come in without sovereign guarantees. It's only with the energy sector, the independent power providers, who always, because of the business and because electricity tariffs are not that high enough to cover costs, that they always want a government cover. And even with that, we stopped giving them sovereign guarantees or government support in the way we used to. What we've done now, and I think this is an important thing for Ghanaians to know, is we've looked at the termination clauses of those agreements and decided that, listen, what is it that you're concerned about, you, the independent power provider? I'm concerned about what happens if you don't buy the electricity I produce. What do I do with the plant? I can't easily fold it up and take it to another country. So we said, okay, so you can decide to sell it to us. Give us the first right of refusal to buy, and we'll pay for it. Or we can call on you to buy from you. So that's what we call the put-call option agreements. And those are the supports that we are now using rather than sovereign guarantees and direct cash support or collateral support. We are now using this arrangement, which is easier on our balance sheet.
Can we just stay there for a while? I want to talk about the energy crisis. Have we completely solved it? Because we heard that it was about money.
Okay, so the energy crisis that first came was about generation capacity. We've solved the generation capacity. You all know car power, the emergency ones, there's that, the long list of power providers. We've solved generation capacity. In fact, the Deputy Minister of Power always reminds me that we even have an oversupply now. However, there's a value chain to delivering electricity to you and I at home or in industry. There is the transmission, the grid, and all that before it comes into ECG and NETCO, who actually pass it on to us and who bill us and collect from us. So production is fine. Now we have a mix that is not predominantly hydro. We now have a mix with thermal, and soon we'll have one with LNG, gas to power, and all that. So that's, you know, when I mentioned Sankofa, that's one of the good news, that it will produce a lot of gas that the Tuobo plant can use to. So you have the value chain, and what is important there then is that we should now improve the delivery end of the value chain, which is ECG. And that's why we started talking about the private sector participation. That comes out of the Power Africa, the Millennium Compact Challenge. We set up MIDA in Ghana. We've been given funds to help us to restructure that sector. And with the private sector participation, what will happen is it's only the operating and management of ECG that will be given to someone who is good at doing that to manage. but the asset itself will still be owned by the government of Ghana. So they'll better operate, and what will be critical will be the billing and the collection. And I do see that this week and last week, ECG has done a great job in terms of illegal connections, being able to cut down on that. We've also improved on commercial losses along the grids and all that. So revenue is coming in on that side.
How about revenue?
So
how about what's the
fuel.
MMDAs and the government agencies owe ECG?
We'll get to that in a second. So generation capacity sorted out, then fuel, and you said money. And when the issue was about money, it was about buying fuel to run the plants to generate the power. So that has also been solved to the extent that we now have gas coming from Sankofa Jinjami next year, and the 10 fields as well. And also we have the LNG that we will import and use as well to run those plants. So that situation is sorted out. I also noticed that there is talk about having fuel buffer stock, a reserve stock. That is a strategy. My minister, Setekwe, has talked about it. Other people have also talked about it. In fact, it was in the newspaper this week. I believe that that's a great strategy. Most of the developed countries have that as a buffer to make sure that they can stabilize prices of fuel, and also that delivery, supply of fuel is consistent. So, Mama V, that problem has been resolved by making sure...
Do we owe anybody? I know I'm asking you too many questions at the same time. Do we owe anybody?
So we've sorted that out, and I want to just end on the billing and collections. Once we are collecting and the money is flowing in, we can pay the company that brings the power, Gridco. We can pay those who produce it, VRA and all the others, and we solve that debt situation within the power sector. So that is very important. Now, owing. So MMDAs, MDAs, basically government owes ECG. We've resolved that to a large extent. We came out with the Energy Sector Levy Act, and now we started collecting that levy on petroleum products. That levy has gone a long way to pay down a lot of that debt. We have also now said all the MDAs, MMDAs, must have prepaid meters. Gone are the days when you can just use any quantum of electricity. Again, within their budgets, we allocate an amount for electricity, and they must manage that within the month. You don't leave air conditioners on and so forth, and they are doing that. They are stepping up to the plate. So we see them managing their budgets better, and then we also see that the prepaid meters is working, because if you use your allocation, well, you have to find some other way. The other way is solar. So a lot of the MDAs, even including Ministry of Finance, we are putting the solar panels on our rooftops and creating areas to have solar panels, and so that we have the dual. And that has been very helpful. In fact, in my home, I now have solar panels as well. So I noticed that my bill has come down considerably.
That's good. We probably should all switch to
solar. So
alternate
power is important.
But staying on the issue of power, you talked about the strategic stocks that you'd like to hold, so that we have some buffer. But the BDCs aren't hot for that idea.
Of course. If you were them, would you be hot for that idea?
No, but
they want to sell.
Yeah, but they're also thinking that this is because government wants to interfere in the pricing, which you have also already claimed.
With the deregulation.
We've deregulated, and thankfully, GOIL, TOR, and BOST have stepped up beautifully and shown us that we were paying too much and that we could actually pay less. They helped us to make sure that the price of petroleum products to the end user was reasonable and not filled with a lot of margin. Now let's come to the bulk distribution companies. So they are a good part of the value chain, there's no doubt. They serve a purpose. But they themselves must be in a financial position which is strong to be able to deliver that service. You don't go and borrow expensive, try and run a quick one, pay off the loan and keep the margin. You haven't done anything. You need to do more than that. And that's why now we ask them to have tank farms so that they can store and so forth and so on. But they need to improve on their capital structure so that they can be robust and strong and work within the value chain, not to be just margin pickers. And I think they can step up to it. We are talking to a lot of them, and we are seeing that, of course, they are very intelligent, they are business savvy, and they will step up to it. In anything that pushes them to the margins, they work on it and they come back strong.
Even if government still owes them quite a bit?
You remember that what we owed them had to be validated. And when it was validated, we found out that it was much less. Thank God we validated it. Otherwise, we would have just thrown government money away. But we did, and it was less, and payments have begun to them.
Fixing ECG, the concession through the MCA has been the option we've chosen. Was that the smartest and the most prudent way of dealing with it, if indeed it was an expertise issue? Expertise is now a commodity. Couldn't we have raised, you know, some funds and bought the expertise and kept ECG you know, going?
So let's go back to the basics. ECG as a company is still 100% and will still be 100% owned by government of Ghana. The assets will not move. The operation and management, which is what you are talking about, can't that be hired? Yes, it can, and that's what we are looking to do. So we put out a request for qualification, made sure that we only were seeking to pick from people who were truly qualified, and then they brought proposals because they are the experts. So they brought proposals, and we looked at proposals that will fit us, and we will make a determination of who will deliver that operations and management expertise that you just spoke about. So that's what will happen. They will use the current ECG workers. They will use almost all of them for at least 5 years. During that period, there will be natural attrition, and there'll be people who may not want to stay on, and there may be new people who may even come in to ECG. But the important thing is that ECG will become more efficient in terms of billing, collection, reducing commercial losses. All the leakages will be reduced because the private sector who will be coming in, who has the expertise, won't take a chance on their return. They must get their return because they are bringing working capital as well.
But observers and analysts of this particular process are quite concerned that, especially with the revelation of the Article 7.1, which gives them pretty much the leeway to have certain agreements that sit outside of our legal powers or our laws.
Just before I come to that, Inshra, you mentioned something. You were talking about I've forgotten about it. It was to do with ECG. The expertise I said we could bring. Right. And then there was something else about
but
using
that may
the
be
people.
That rather than you know the concessionaires are not talent that you're sourcing from various places. But
no.
These are people
wasn't it the best approach?
You were talking about the approach.
Yeah, was that
you were
the
talking
best
about
approach?
the approach. Yes, right. We actually hired a transaction advisor, IFC, who did other country study. So there was a lot of knowledge sharing, peer study, checking out what happens in other countries, how they did it. Some of them listed on stock exchange, some of them sold shares to the workers at the electricity company, some of them practically gave away their electricity company to others to work. So we looked at the different ones. There was also a lot of stakeholder consultation with civil society, with all those who participate in power production and all that. And those discussions were extensive. I was actually part of some of those discussions before we came to this final thing together with MCC, that this is the way that we would go.
So why is the same civil society
it's
up in arms?
It's funny how many times in meetings people agree to things and then in public they start playing to the gallery. But I guess it's human nature. And the important thing for us is what we've agreed in our meetings. And that's why you sign up to the things that you agree. So if you sign up and then go and stand somewhere else and start saying the opposite, I don't know what that is trying to achieve. But the most important thing is that for the nation, it's not about a few people, but for the whole nation, that we are able to make electricity provision more reliable and better priced.
Let's look at, just before you come in,
He talked about something about Article 71.
Well, the 7.1, the agreement, the concession agreement, where it states that essentially between ECG and the concessionist, between MEDA and the concessionist, they could agree on specific terms which will not be subject to our laws.
No, that is not the intent. Whatever happens in Ghana is subject to the laws of Ghana. However, there are times when a concessionaire is bringing in funds, and therefore those funds are also coming from another jurisdiction. So we need to negotiate and agree how we govern that arrangement where funds are coming from another jurisdiction, because they have to repay. So as they come in, we make sure we build in sweetness to allow them to be able to come, bring their working capital, work and get a reasonable return.
All right, let's go back to the economy. You talked up the prospects of our economy. One of the key indicators of a growing economy or a good economy is the cost of borrowing. That's
good
not
or
the
growing, Ishra?
Well, a good economy, a healthy one.
Okay.
Cost of borrowing. We still have a high cost of borrowing in Ghana, so that's a little, contrary to what the literature suggests.
Can you box that with the high cost of doing business? Because that was what I was coming to.
Beautiful. So in terms of cost of borrowing on the public side, on our side, we've seen the cost of borrowing trend downwards. Do you want me to go through? So the first Eurobond was priced, and then the second Eurobond, third, fourth, fifth, and we've seen prices trending down to the extent that even the dollar bond that we issued locally, like I said, was at 6.25. So clearly interest rates have been trending down for us, which means...
But we're told it hasn't been that significant.
Which means it doesn't matter. It's any little shift south for interest rates is to be celebrated. And that indicates investor confidence, which was one of the primary reasons why we went into the IMF fund program. So investor confidence is picking up, and we are seeing that from messages that the development partners and lenders are telling us. On the private side, cost of borrowing has been high, especially for SMEs. But recently, with our debt management strategy and with us coming out of the short and medium term, the interest rates there have started to trend downwards. We've even seen that treasury bills are turning down. So our yield curve, which was a funny one in the past, because then the longer dated was, nobody wanted the longer dated, and therefore has now started to change. And we are now seeing a lower interest rate in the front, and hopefully the interest rates will pick up at the back end, now that we are in the back end, the 7-year and the 10-year part of it. So I think that private sector is going to start seeing, and they've already started seeing, that interest rates are coming down. Because inflation has come down as well, we should start seeing interest rates also following suit and coming down. Monetary policy rate has come down. The banks will change their base rates, hopefully. They are commercial banks, they can make their own decision, but hopefully they will reduce their base rates too, so that lending... Is there a certain percentage? I don't know what formula the commercial banks use. Any time that NPR comes down, I don't know what they use.
There's a, according to watchers, something that we have to be very worried about, in that currently there are quite a lot of non-performing loans on the books of the banks, the commercial banks. Couple that with the fact that government also have backed a lot of debts for the players within the energy sector, the SOEs in that space. So
starting from the back, we have not done whatever you're saying about debt for energy
guaranteed
sector. We haven't done that. We've been very careful with that. But what is...
But the SOEs do have debts
which we are helping them to manage.
Okay.
We are
so
making
you're
sure
only
that
helping them manage?
We are helping them manage by ensuring that they are putting monies away to service those debts.
Is that not going to put these banks in distress?
Now, to the banks do have a lot of non-performing loans. It speaks to their credit appraisal methods. It also speaks to the cost of funding. What was the price that they put on those loans out there? Sometimes when you overprice loans, and customers who just want the money will sign any agreement just to take the money and later have difficulty repaying. you've created a monster there. So I'm always careful, and I always speak to the fact that we should not overprice funding to the private sector. Let's not put in a high margin, because you won't get that margin because they will not pay. You will end up with a non-performing loan. Price it in a way that it is easier for this private sector or SME to be able to repay. Make it easier for them to repay by keeping the cost of funding reasonable. What do we see? We see banks declaring huge profits. Of course, they're entitled to it. I used to be private sector until recently. They must make their monies, but don't make such a large margin that you compromise those who work with you. You are a team. Your customers and yourselves are a team. You work together to make money. So you can't make money alone. But when you try and do that, you will create a high non-performing
But government's
loan.
borrowing is what sets your rate tends to set the benchmark around
the rate at which we borrow.
Yeah, it's kind of influences
so
how they price.
when we go out to seek funding, we don't necessarily determine the loan, except for the last Eurobond where we dictated a little bit. But locally, we don't determine the loan price. It is determined by the lender, whoever is giving us the money. So if you say that because of our high demand for loans, that prices have gone up, I'm saying that now we are no longer in the short and medium term. We are in the longer term where most of the private sector is not. So we are out of that space. So this speaks to the accusation that had been there that we were crowding out the private sector. It's now clear that we were not. Because now that we are out of the space, they can take the space.
We're almost getting to the end of our conversation. This is our 1 hour with the National Democratic Congress, and Madam Mona Quartey is our guest. So going forward, you might want to touch on some of the policies that you intend rolling out.
Okay, so we've had a lot of structural reforms. You know, we had a very ambitious fiscal targets that were set in the fund program and in our homegrown policy. We've gone through the hardest part of it. We've rolled out most of the reforms. We now have the Public Financial Management Act, which governs the way that we manage public finances. So all the other laws, the Financial Administrative Act, the Loans Act and all that, will all now be repealed so that we just have this one. The rules and regulations will be sorted out soon, and it will bring more efficiency in public financial management. Government now does not borrow anymore from the central bank. The Bank of Ghana Act has been amended. It wasn't amended to 0 to 5%.
That's right.
But in effect, we stopped borrowing from the central bank this year. Last year, we borrowed up to 5%, but this year, we didn't borrow at all. And we've survived, and we've done well. We've adjusted to the ecosystem. So that, then in terms of our revenue mobilization, we've modernized that. We've come out with new legislation there too. So the Customs Act, the Income Tax Act, and all that. In fact, the Revenue Administration Bill, which is a new act, is also out. So in terms of regulatory framework, we've set that up very well, and it will allow efficiency going forward. There were some new taxes that came into effect. Some of those new taxes created increase, and some created decreases. A lot of people always think a new tax means an increase, but some actually created decrease, especially with the casual workers and so forth. We decreased their taxes. So going forward, we are going to continue with those reforms. We'll make sure that we roll them out. Where there are difficulties, we'll make sure that we correct them, because we are not just tunnel vision and just trying to, you know, push taxes down the throats of people. But where there are difficulties, we will take back or adjust. We always make sure that the Commissioner General has the authority to have the discretion to make little changes. So where you have good corporate tax citizens, they can always go and discuss within the business context, and they can have some exemptions made for them. The other big thing is tax exemptions generally to attract investors. We gave a lot of that out in order to attract investors. Now we are honing in on those tax exemptions. We are being very careful. In the first place, it's only Parliament that can give those exemptions. And that's why you hear about them, because we go to Parliament. We are reducing those exemptions. We are making sure that they are not abused and that they are targeted.
The IMF program, Ghana in an election year, you're talking marginal stability. Is it because the IMF has a cane and you know, behind through the program, streamlining how we manage our economy?
And so I think this is something that we needed to do anyway. And all of us, I'll say you and I, all went to Senchi. And I say that meaning all, I mean most Ghanaian reps went to Senchi to discuss how we improve the situation. We were no longer happy with the way our economy was going. And we came out with a Senchi consensus. Then we got the IMF to come in, really to give us investor credibility. Because what we had decided to do at home was being viewed by the international community as, can they do it? But we brought the IMF to give us that investor credibility, and they've done that. They made us front load a lot of the reforms, and we've done that. They gave us a little money towards balance of payment, $918 million. That has gone towards balance of payment. It's helped to stabilize our currency. And it's helped us to create the enabling environment that will allow business, and especially the private sector, to thrive. And the SMEs, very important, to thrive.
What would it have been like without the IMF program?
We would still have done what we've done, except whenever we would have pushback because people would be uncomfortable with the difficulty in rolling out some of these reforms, we may have backed down. But because we had the IMF watching, and because we wanted to continue to borrow from the international market and get long tenors, long maturities, and better grace periods, we became disciplined, fiscally disciplined, and we made sure that we consolidated the macroeconomy.
All right, Madam Monacote, thank you so much for making it. Thanks for
you.
your time. Thanks for all the insights.
Thank you very much, and we've enjoyed being here. It's important that we are able to complete what we've started, and therefore the NDC government must get a second term to ensure completion, fruitful completion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And it's a wrap for our conversations with the National Democratic Congress. Let me just say that this is a paid-for conversation. We started Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday. On the AM show, it's 44 minutes after 8. We've got entertainment coming up on the Super Morning Show.
It's
That's Insure Your Business.
And we still have quite a lot of conversations coming your way. We'll be looking at that borehole conversation. We weren't able to do that yesterday, and a couple of other issues. You know, the flag bearers of 3 of the political parties are concerned that they haven't had a good chance to sell their stories, and they feel that they're not in the best of shape compared to the others. We'll look into all of that.
All right, stay with us on the Super Morning Show and definitely on the AM show here on Joy News.